The unsponsored truth about closed cell spray foam. That's what today's video is about, bringing clarity, bringing transparency to this subject. Welcome to Mr. Postframe, and let's get going. Recently, I've been notified by multiple people of a video that R&R Buildings recently did about rock wool and spray foam, where Kyle says all these things about spray foam that are terrible. And we're going to go over all of those. I don't know what Kyle's intentions were with it. I did go and watch the video and hear what he said. He gave no context to what he was saying. He gave no evidence. He gave no real life examples, any of that. I know Kyle personally. I don't think he had any ill will on this. The facts are the facts. If you're going to talk bad about another product, we have to bring context and evidence and facts to that. Assumption is the mother of all screw ups. That's the nice way of putting it. You have to have facts. You have to have data. Otherwise, it means nothing. So let's get into this video. I do want to be clear that I have nothing against Kyle and R&R Buildings. He does unbelievable things for the post frame industry and building in general. He's a really good guy. I just don't like that I'm getting people calling me and telling me that they're afraid to use closed cell spray foam because of this video, and then I watch the video and there's no context or no proof to what he's saying. The first thing I think we need to do is just talk about the history of spray foam in general. It was originally started developing in the 1930s and 1940s. They used it for things in like aircraft and of that sort. It wasn't until the 1970s that it was commercialized and they started using it in residential. Let's fast forward today. We are using spray polyurethane. This is a different chemistry. It's a different makeup, vastly more inert and stable, and is a good insulating product. All right, guys, one of the first things we're going to talk about is the statement that spray foam doesn't hold its R value. So before we get into that, let's talk about what R value is. We all know it's the resistance of the heat transferring through something, and that is tested by the American Society for Testing and Materials. So it's an ASTM standard that products have to go through in order to get an R value. C518, you can look it up. It will give you all of the stats on how the test is conducted, what it is testing for, how they get the outcome. Heat loss comes from three different things. It comes from conductivity, convection, and radiation. So there's three things that you have to test for when you're trying to figure out how good a product is at heat loss. In the ASTM standards for R value, they only test for conductive heat loss. That's it. One method. All right, guys, I'm going to leave a link to a more in-depth video on R value right now. This will give you a much better understanding of how R value is tested for, and you can see for yourself that there are a couple things that it is lacking to get the true capability of a product to resist heat. Does closed cell spray foam hold its R value? So polyurethane closed cell spray foam consists of part A, part B. During the cure process, it's a chemical reaction where gases and oxygen are exchanged. And initially, closed cell spray foam comes out in an extremely high R value. Very quickly, as the chemical reaction happens, it will drop down to the advertised R value. As far as long term, here in the US, I did find an ASTM standard 1303 that is a long-term thermal resistance test for closed cell spray foam. I could not find any documentation that this is a required test for closed cell spray foam, and I couldn't find any results of closed cell spray foam being tested and what the long-term results are. However, in Canada, this is a required test for closed cell spray foam. And what they do is they have a similar standard that is required for them to test for long-term thermal resistance, and it's out to 30 years. And then they advertise the worst case R value, which is the 30-year evaluated number. So up in Canada, they do require a test for it, and the advertised R value per inch is what the worst case scenario is. If you compare the specs of the spray foam they're using in Canada and here, some of it is exactly the same, some of it's just slightly different. So I would imagine that they're somewhat similar in their performance. However, like I said, I can find no test result from ASTM 1303 on closed cell spray foam. So if someone has that documentation that can prove that closed cell spray foam loses its R value over time, whatever that time is, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I would love to see it. I think I would find that very interesting. So let's talk about the flammability of closed cell spray foam. If you look at the spec sheet of spray foam, no matter what you're going to get, it's going to give you the data. It has to go through ASTM E84, which is the fire testing method. And I'm going to put my spray foam up here that I use. It has a Class A fire rating. So that means it scores 25 or less on fire spread, and it scores 450 or less on smoke spread. That means it does not spread fire and smoke very easily. If you take rock wool, if you take fiberglass, mineral wool, they're all Class A. So it is in the same class fire rating as these other insulation values. The difference is if there's enough flame around it and heat, it can burn. So if you take your house, which is made of wood, which at best all of that wood in your house is a Class B, then it will burn if that is burning. So if you have a bad enough incident that you catch the wood and burnable stuff in your house on fire and it gets up to a certain temperature, then it can burn. So yes, it is more flammable than fiberglass, rock wool, mineral wool, but it still has a Class A fire rating, means it just doesn't burn that easy. So it is safe to use in your house. If you search on the internet, how flammable is spray foam, you'll get all these videos of people just like burning spray foam, but do you know what kind of spray foam that is? There's a guy on YouTube that does a demonstration and he used canned foam. Okay, that isn't the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing as closed cell spray foam with a Class A fire rating. So don't be afraid that your house is going to burn down. I've done burn tests on it, and I've literally held a torch to it for 5 minutes, and you will get some flame, but the fire does not spread, and as soon as you pull the torch away, the fire goes out. So it doesn't contribute to a fire until there is enough other things on fire and hot enough to get it to burn. So just keep that in mind. It isn't unsafe to put in your house. And if we look at the top reasons your house burns down, one is kitchen fires. And that has to do with human error. That has to do with people not paying attention. The second leading cause is from heaters during really, really cold times of the year. People will use space heaters. Typically, space heaters aren't used in new construction homes, and they're probably certainly not going to be used in a house that is filled with closed cell spray foam because it is going to be super efficient and super comfortable. So I doubt that's going to cause a fire. I don't know. Maybe your kid will stick a torch in the wall, but even then it's not going to burn the spray foam. You would have to catch the wood on fire. And if you look at a post frame wall with 8-foot bay spacing, there is no exposed wood except for the front girts. And hold a torch to a 2x4 for 5 minutes and then pull it away. It takes a substantial amount of material to get a fire going. You have to have something else. Even an electrical fire, like with the technology we have today with GFCI and AFC breakers, and they trip. If you breathe on your outlet, they trip. So if you have a wire short, the chances of that ever catching anything on fire is pretty low. 2x4 and a piece of the spray foam, closed cell spray foam that I used. You can see, I can touch this. It's burnt, it's done. It's 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Look at this. I bet you I can't touch that wood. Let's address the off-gassing comment. This is a big one across the internet. ASTM D8142 is the third-party test for off-gassing. It's a test that will measure emission of VOCs from a cured sample of spray foam along with air sampling. The test then evaluates the product and says whether it is a low VOC, zero ozone depletion type product or not. This test, along with several other tests, are the basis for the Green Guard Gold certification that spray foams can get for their product if they pass these tests. A couple things when you are looking for a spray foam that you want to do. One is you want to use a product. Not all products are equal, correct? If you think about subflooring, there's a million different subfloors out there you can choose from. If you're thinking about sheathing, there's a bunch of different sheathings out there. Every part of your house has different products that do the same thing, but they have different certifications, they have different qualities that will make them better or worse, and that's no different in the spray foam world. Not all spray foam is created equally. So one, if you're going to use spray foam in your house, use a high-end spray foam from one of the main manufacturers that has the Green Guard Gold status. The Green Guard Gold status basically says this is low VOC, it's zero ozone depletion, and it is safe for people to use it in their residence or places that are inhabited. The second part of having your spray foam installed is you have to find a good, reputable installer. Just like every other trade, there's the good, there's the bad, and there's the ugly. So find a good installer, somebody that takes pride in their work and that does a good job. All right, the next thing on the list is you don't know if you have a leak. Let's just talk about walls first, and then we'll talk about the ceiling. If we're talking about walls, it doesn't matter what kind of insulation you're using, you're not gonna know if you have a leak. Okay, if you're using fiberglass, it's going to soak the water up, and I can prove that. I had a bad experience with spray foam, not because of the actual spray foam, but because of the installation. But you're not going to know in your wall system if you have a small leak. You are only as good as your weather barrier and the installation of your cladding and all of that. So that has to be done well. So that's the first thing. The biggest problem with closed cell spray foam is when it's sprayed on the roof deck. But let's think about that. If you are going to use closed cell spray foam on your roof deck, which I think is a great idea, think about this and say, hey, what am I putting on for roofing material? What is my underlayment going to be? If I was building my perfect house and I was going to spray closed cell spray foam on the roof deck, which I wish I would have had the money to do, I would put on a self-adhered permeable membrane that self-heals around any fasteners. And that would help you if you were using an exposed fastener metal, or if you were going to do shingles, because it will self-heal around that. If you're going to use like a standing seam, you are going to have a pretty bulletproof roof system. So if you are going to use closed cell spray foam, those are things you need to think about. You really need to be thinking about that no matter what kind of insulation you're using. What are the things that could go wrong? And how do I defend against that? Yeah, I can see how you could be nervous about possibly getting a leak in your roof and not knowing about it. Whereas if you had insulation right above your ceiling. You know, you could go up there in your attic every couple of weeks or whatever to see if you had a leak, which, by the way, no one does. No one goes up in their attic, and if you do, you are a minority. But like, nobody's doing that. Nobody's going up in the attic, so you're probably not going to know if you have a leak either way. You're going to know when it's coming through your drywall if it's bad enough. Second thing, if you are putting insulation right above your ceiling, you have to make sure you have a killer vapor barrier on your ceiling. So that means all penetrations have to be sealed. Around lights, around vents, around fire alarms, all that stuff has to be sealed. So no matter what you pick, there are things you have to do to make sure you have a good air seal and that you are protected. And since we're talking about closed cell spray foam sprayed directly to the underneath of the roof deck, there's a study by the University of Florida, I believe it is, where they tested on a stick frame home, placing spray foam on the roof deck and how it helps with uplift. And it's something like, I'll try to look it up and post it here, but it's something like increase in the uplift value of your roofing structure with closed cell spray foam. It's pretty fascinating to look at it, but if you were in a really high wind area like Florida or anywhere where hurricanes can hit, that is an unbelievable value added to your structure if you can spray foam your deck. You just have to make sure you're doing the other things properly on top so it works as a system and that it is safe. The next thing, it is, quote, a lazy, cheap way to get an air seal. I'm a little confused by that one because the next thing we're gonna cover is the cost. So right off the bat, it isn't a cheap way to get your air seal because closed cell spray foam is more expensive than other insulations. Lazy, I wouldn't say that because the people spraying your foam have to go through training and make sure they're doing it right. So I wouldn't say it's a lazy way. You have to have a person that really knows what they're doing. It is hard work. If you ever watch a spray foamer, like a good spray foamer, they are methodically taking their time going through this. They're wearing a suit, they're wearing a mask. So it isn't lazy. It isn't easy. I don't understand that statement. So to get your air seal and vapor barrier, it isn't cheap and it isn't a lazy way. Spray foam will crack over time. In the US, ASTM D2126 is the dimensional stability testing that spray foam goes through to prove that if it is installed properly to manufacturer's specifications, it will not crack due to the normal movement of a building. So whether you're in the far south or you're in the far north, you're going to have expansion and contraction of building materials due to the heat and cold. And this test shows that cracking and losing your air barrier and vapor barrier is not a problem when properly installed. All right, guys, on the same note, take any building product, especially like zip sheathing, LP Weather Logic, any kind of siding. It all has ratings and testing that is done to it to tell you what kind of movement it can handle. And then there are installation processes and procedures that you have to abide by in order for it to be effective. So if you don't gap zip sheathing properly and then the building starts expanding and contracting, you can have problems. Same thing with roofing materials, same thing with siding. It all has to be installed properly in order to withstand those movements. And if it's not, then you could have problems. Think about all of the sealant that is put on a house with hardy plank siding or LP, smart side. All of that stuff has to be tested so that they know when it's installed properly, it's not going to crack and create air gaps, let water in, and all of that. Closed cell spray foam is somewhere in the 30 to 40 PSI range, okay? And if your building is moving enough that it is cracking it, because you got to think about this, it is a glue-based product, so you are gluing your structure together. And as far as like the way I build post frame structures, it's going in behind the columns, between the girts, and it is locking all of that together. So if I'm getting enough movement in the building that it is cracking my spray foam, that means all of my drywall in the house is also cracked at a 1/2 or 5/8 inch thick, depending on your interior girt spacing. So I'm not sure where there's evidence of this, and there's actually studies out there that show that closed cell spray foam increases the racking strength of your structure by 200 to 300%. Like that's incredible. That's another thing that nobody talks about with closed cell spray foam is the structural value that it brings. So think about if you're building in Florida or you're building in a hurricane zone, that is giving you an incredible amount of structural strength that you aren't going to get with any other kind of insulation. All right, one of the last statements that I'm going to address is the affordability of rock wool over spray foam. And we're going to talk about the systems that was used in this particular video to obtain an R value. And then we're going to talk about the materials that were used in Kyle's shop to get his R value. And we're going to break those costs down into price per square foot so that you can see that there isn't that big of a difference. And in fact, the house that he is building is more expensive than 3 inches of closed cell spray foam. So let's go ahead. I'm going to put these numbers on the screen as I go through them. So if you look at this house in the video that Kyle is building, it's got an R21 rock wool bat. I cannot find that available anywhere in my area, so the only pricing I could get is on an R23. So there is a little bit of difference in that, but at an R23, if you look up on Home Depot, our Home Depot sells it 478 square feet for $1,159 plus tax. Our tax rate is 7%, so that's $1,240 for 478 square feet. If you divide that, that's $2.59 a square foot. If you take the Siga Myrex, that's the cheapest I could find it, was $484.99 a roll. That's 820 square feet. That's 60 cents a square foot. So if you add those both together, you're at around $323 a square foot. That is not including labor. I know what I would charge to do those two things. We had a house that had rock wool and Siga Myrex in it. You know, I don't know what Kyle charges, and that's none of my business, and I don't really care, but at the smallest amount, it's $3.23 a square foot, but that's an R21 wall. The 2021 IRC went to R21 wall with an R5 continuous insulation. What jurisdictions are enforcing that is basically up to them. But if you also look at what Kyle has done to this house, it's got LP Novacore continuous sheathing on the outside. That's an R5. The cheapest I could find that in Iowa is $83.67 a sheet. If I subtract, and so there's R value there. There's an R5 R value there. So that would give him an R21 and R5, so an R26 value in his wall. So if you take that and you have to subtract just general sheathing away from that because that's not fair. So if you take that at 18, I pay $18.19 a sheet of 1/2 inch OSB. That brings that down to that sheet of R5 insulation that he's put on the side is costing $2.04 a square feet. So if you add the LP Novacore, the rock wool, and the Siga Myrex, that's $5.23 a square foot, no labor included. 3 inches of closed cell spray foam gets you to R21, which if you go and do your own research, it will perform way better than an R21 fibrous material cost me $4.50. That's tax, that's installation, that's everything done. So if you do the same wall system that he's doing, you're at $5.23 a square foot versus $4.50 a square foot. And so if you're like, well, you need to add another inch because that's not fair, he's at R26, well, that's fine. Add another $1.50, so it's $6 a square foot versus $5.23. And if you do just the rock wool and Siga Myrex at $3.23, and then you add labor on that, it's going to be almost a wash. You're not getting like some great deal. And I have done rock wool and Siga Myrex on a building, and there are a lot of details that need to be done right. If you can hire Kyle to do it, you're going to get an incredible result. And there are other people out there that are going to do that kind of work, but I'm telling you, it isn't going to be cheap. Maybe Kyle gets some special deal or gives a break on his labor, but there's a substantial amount of time that goes into applying Siga Myrex, applying a vapor barrier in general to the inside of your wall, and it's not going to be cheap if it's done properly. And then for those of you who are like, well, I'm going to do it like Kyle did on his shop, which is unbelievable. I'm sure he's going to have an incredibly efficient shop. He used 1.5 inch Comfort Board 80, which my price, and I'm not saying Kyle didn't get a deal on it or get it for free, because sometimes I get stuff for free. It's $1.58 a square foot for the 1.5 inch Comfort Board 80. And you have to cut it down, so you are losing some. We're not going to add that in, but it's $1.58 a square foot. He used Rockwool R23. My price is $2.59 a square foot. And then the Siga Myrex is 60 cents a square foot. So that's $4.70 a square foot for the insulation system he put in to his shop. 3 inches of closed cell spray foam would be $4.50 my cost with installation. Those numbers do not include labor. And if you watch that video, it is extremely time consuming cutting and putting all of that Comfort Board 80 in. But it's not what everybody's saying, that it's so much better deal than closed cell spray foam. And we need to understand like what is actually happening. It's not just the insulation, it's the wall system. There is labor that goes into putting insulation in the wall. It just so happens that closed cell spray foam, it's included in the price because it is only a certified person can install closed cell spray foam. So it is included in the price. Anyone can go out and buy Rockwool, can go out and buy Siga Myrex, and they can do it on themselves. And I am all for that. You guys know I am a DIY from the core. Like, that's how I've been my whole life. I've remodeled all my own houses. I've done all my own electric, my plumbing, my insulation. I've done it all. And so I believe in that. And I'm not saying that I don't want anybody to use Rockwool. I don't want anybody to use fiberglass, that I want everybody to use closed cell spray foam. I just want you guys not to be afraid to use closed cell spray foam because of what you're hearing on the internet. All right, guys, that's going to kind of wrap up this video. And this has got me thinking a lot about being, a content creator, an influencer. It's kind of weird thinking of myself like that, but I want to put good information out there. I want you guys to be able to trust it. But you have to do your own research. You got to get out there, figure out, what the truth is and what the truth is not. That's on you. I've put a lot of stuff on the screen during this video. I'm going to continue on this journey of like investigating different things because it's really frustrating to me that there's so many different answers out there. It just feels like that this could be a whole lot simpler. But I think all of us, when we're building our own house, we get into this analysis paralysis. We hear somebody say something and it immediately makes us afraid. Fear is the number one sales tactic across the board in all industries. If they can make you afraid of something, they can make you buy something, they can make you use something that you normally wouldn't use without doing your research. I'm not saying that's what Kyle's intentions were in this video, because I know Kyle personally and I know he's not like that. But what he said in the video that everybody shared with me didn't give enough details about what he was saying. Most of what he said could be true, but it also can be explained and you can be like, oh, well, that makes sense. So no matter what kind of insulation you pick, you have to make sure that your weather barrier is installed properly, that you have the right sheathing, that you have the right material cladding, and that it's all waterproof, and that you're sealing out the air, and that you're doing a good job. The thing that I personally love, I'm not going to lie and say I don't like closed cell spray foam, because I do. The thing I like about it is that it is my air barrier, it is my vapor barrier, it is my insulation value. It gives me unbelievable structural value. One of the biggest things is my vapor barrier is always in the right spot. If you look at the building codes down in the south and warmer climates, the vapor barrier needs to be on the outside of the wall because it's typically warmer on the outside and you're cooling on the inside. And in the north, colder climates, it needs to be on the warm side of the wall where it's warm inside and it's cold outside. But what happens what if you're in that in-between area, like the Midwest, where you have cold winters, but you have hot, humid summers? What is happening in my wall? Because it's the reverse. We get 100-degree temperatures with humidity here, so is my vapor barrier then on the wrong side? Is anybody going back and opening up walls and seeing what's going on inside the walls? But by using closed cell spray foam, I know that my vapor barrier is where it needs to be, whether it's freezing cold outside or whether it's scalding hot outside. It's where it needs to be. So if that is the lazy, easy way to get my air seal vapor barrier, then so be it. And this will not be the last video. I'm going to reach out to some of the industry leaders and see if I can't, get on podcasts, do videos with them, because I want to bring more light to this situation and more transparency for you guys, because you need to understand the pros and cons to the decisions you're making on your house in order to have a good result. But that's going to be a wrap on today's video. Hopefully you guys found this useful. Hopefully you found it informative. Don't forget to hit that like button. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to share us, and don't stop dreaming.